A big welcome, everyone, to this Menopause at Work network meeting. For those of you who I haven't met before, my name's Thea O'Connor. I'm a workplace wellbeing advisor, and I specialise in helping midlife working women achieve their career potential. And I do this through helping workplaces become menopause friendly through education, training and consulting. But I'm really interested to know, can you let me know how many of you are here for the first time? And if you just pop your hand up in the, your little reactions buttons down the bottom there. I just see hands up if who's here for the first time. Okay, great, thank you. So yeah, big welcome to you. And for those who haven't been before, which looks like a good third or maybe even a half, just let you know the purpose of these quarterly meetups is to provide a space where workplace professionals can come together to connect, to learn, either from peers or experts, and also just to be inspired by what other people are doing. Looking at menopause in the workplace, it's still a relatively new area, which is a bit ironic given that menopause itself has been around since the beginning of humanity. But because it's still a new thing that workplaces are getting their head around, I just think it's great to share resources and support each other. So just to give you a little idea about how today is structured, because it is a network meeting, we're going to take just 3 or 4 minutes in a breakout room just for a quick one-on-one. Imagine you're at a workshop and you go up to someone and say, hi, what's your name? What got you here? In your breakout rooms, you can manage your own boundaries, of course, and share as much or as little as you like. I'm just going to have a quick connect in a moment. Then we'll have presentations from our 2 wonderful presenters today, Dr. Kelly Teagle and also Sue Woodall. And then please make the use of Q&A time with these 2 women while you've got them online. And then to finish up, we'll finish up with a breakout room for you to consider with some other workplace people. What do you want to take out of today? And in particular, what maybe could your workplaces be doing a little better? So that's how today rolls. I do like to allow until 1:15, depending on how the discussion goes. We'll see how we go. So at this point, I'm going to pause the recording as I do when we go into breakout rooms.
Thanks for the invitation. This is just such an important topic to cover. So today, I'm just going to have a brief overview of the different reasons why women might go into a medical menopause or an earlier or non-natural menopause, and also how breast cancer is related to this and how the different treatments might impact on that, and also what it might be like from the person's perspective to experience that. So medically speaking, when you've got menopause naturally is when you run out of eggs from the ovaries. So any kind of process that occurs that stops you from ovulating naturally is going to mimic the symptoms associated with that. Low levels of estrogen or dramatically changing levels of estrogen cause the symptoms of menopause. Most notably is the hot flushes, which tend to really impact on people, but it could look different for all women. That might be really brain fog, poor concentration, muscle aches and pains, things like that. And it tends to be that the more sudden or younger sufferer of menopause, or I say sufferer because we're looking at it in the context of some kind of symptoms and suffering, but the earlier you go through and the more suddenly you go through, it tends to be that the symptoms will be more severe and potentially longer lasting for that person. The range of reasons why you might go through a medical menopause, for example, a gynecological cancer, obviously if you had ovarian cancer, they're going to want to take your ovaries out, but it could be other reasons. It could be a what we call prophylactic removal of your ovaries because you're at high risk of developing ovarian cancer or breast cancer. There might be a genetic disposition to developing gynecological cancers. So any reason medically why your medical team might want to either get rid of the ovaries or to reduce your estrogen levels or to stop you from ovulating, those kinds of treatments will cause the same impact on your body as if you went through a natural menopause where your ovarian function declines, except that it's happening for whatever reason at an earlier age, and it's happening more suddenly, particularly if you start taking taking a medication or have a surgery that stops your ovulations or takes your ovaries out. So this could be because of a cancer that puts you at high risk. It could be, like I say, a prophylactic or preventive medical treatment. Any kind of cancer that you might have that requires chemo or radiotherapy, which is toxic to eggs and toxic to the ovaries. This is the reason why younger patients will often freeze their eggs before going through chemo or radiotherapy. But it's important to note that, people's ovaries don't always get completely wiped out permanently by those treatments. Sometimes they're just a bit damaged and they can actually resume function in some way. There are also not just cancer, but adeno or endometriosis, where you've got the deposits of tissue that are similar to the lining of the uterus, but sprinkled throughout the pelvis or other parts of the body. So sometimes the medical teams will give treatments to reduce estrogen levels to stop those endometriotic deposits from growing or bleeding and shedding, and to try and shrink them down. And so there are treatments that can push you into a medical menopause to achieve this. And that can be very debilitating for a younger patient who's very suddenly chucked into 6 or 12 months of treatment like this, that puts them through a medical menopause very suddenly. So any kind of, they might, for example, with endometriosis, have damage to their ovaries or be going through, some kind of other pelvic surgeries, and removal of the endometriosis will involve, by necessity, removing the ovary that's all stuck down by endometriosis. People, when they're having a hysterectomy, if they're close to normal menopausal age, sometimes their surgeon will suggest taking the ovaries out as well, just while we're there, to reduce your risk of ovarian cancer. But that's done less commonly now because there can be long-term side effects over and above what you get from going into menopause. And then there are treatments for cancer itself, or for prevention of recurrence of cancer, like tamoxifen, aromatase inhibitors, things like that, that can actually block the effects of estrogen or stop production of estrogen. And again, that has all the impact throughout your body of going through a natural menopause, except perhaps more suddenly and at a younger age. And this has long-term implications for an increase in risk of heart disease and osteoporosis for those women if they go through much, much younger than normal. How common is this? Well, hormone-dependent breast cancers are generally speaking, in Australia, we quote 1 in 7 women will get breast cancer in their lifetime. And hormone-dependent cancers make up around 70 to 80% of those on average. It's estimated that around 20,000 women will be diagnosed with breast cancer this year, which is really interesting because back in 1983, they diagnosed about 5,300 women with breast cancer. So the question is, is breast cancer becoming more common, or are we just getting much, much better at detecting it and treating it early? Certainly, survival rates are much, much better now than they were in the 80s, of course. What's it like for women who suddenly experience a medical menopause versus a natural menopause? Well, as I mentioned, the younger you go through, the more debilitating that can be in terms of your long-term health, because if your normal menopausal age is 51 and you go through a surgical or a medical menopause in your 30s, you've got 20 or so years where you won't get the benefits of estrogen compared to a woman who goes through it at normal menopausal age. Now, that means 20 years of that person experiencing gradual decline in their bone density. Bones can reduce, around 15 to 20% in the first 5 years after menopause. So that's happening, for this poor person in their 30s compared to being in their 50s. Also, you start to accumulate heart disease risk factors from that time of estrogenic decline, and that's happening 20 years early. So if that person has other risk factors for heart disease, they could be in for really early cardiac or cardiovascular disease. Symptom-wise, as I mentioned earlier, you can get more severe and longer-lasting symptoms. So, you know, that can be incredibly debilitating for somebody trying to function normally, trying to just care for themselves, care for their family, and do their job in their workplace. You know, they can be having, you know, very significant symptoms of flushes, sweats, they can have musculoskeletal aches and pains, and their brain fog and cognition can be significantly affected, particularly if it's happened very, very suddenly. They might have difficulty concentrating. They really find it very undermining to their confidence, because they feel like maybe I'm not up to the job, or what's going on? I've always been on top of everything, and now all of a sudden I can't remember anything. I should have those figures and statistics in my head. I should be able to remember that person's name. They stumble and stagger in the middle of making presentations. So it can be really undermining to their confidence as well as their physical condition. So that's it in a nutshell from me about medical menopause, but I am available, of course, to answer questions at the end of the presentation. So thanks, Thea.
Yeah, thank you so much, Kelly. And as I said, I know you've fitted us in between patients, which I really appreciate. Do you also just want to, you know, for people who might want to follow up with you, I think you've got some contact details there, and I'll do this with Sue as well. I've dropped your web link in the chat box.
Oh, okay. I can certainly pop up a slide just now. Let me just put that up and I'll share my screen with you.
Sure. But I know on Kelly's website at WellFem, they do have a lot of free webinars, which is fantastic, and you can get telehealth appointments.
Yeah, I can't share my screen at the moment, Thea. It's disabled.
No worries. Perhaps after Sue's spoken, we'll put them
both.
on.
No worries.
Yeah, how does that sound? Yeah.
Yep,
but thank you so much, Kelly. Really appreciate that. Our little mini medical lecture today. And for those of you listening, just jot down any particular questions you might have. So I'd now really love to introduce Sue Woodall, who has really kindly offered to share her experience. And I'll just get you to pop your camera on, Sue, and I'll...
It should be on.
Oh, yeah, perfect. There we go. It just comes on when you speak. So I am going to read Sue's intro because there's a bit to cover. So Sue actually has over 30 years executive experience in procurement, consulting and operations in quite complex industrial, technology, retail, services and government sectors. And she's worked for companies like American Express and Qantas as well. Prior to her breast cancer diagnosis, she was the Chief Procurement Officer at New South Wales Government, driving social and commercial outcomes for the state, influencing a spend of more than $30 billion. Now, one little factoid I didn't know about Sue was that she also facilitated legislative change in New South Wales to enable businesses to donate their excess food to charities. Isn't that so good? Without civil liability. And it's called the Good Samaritan legislation, and enables organisations like Oz Harvest to repurpose food. What a fantastic legacy you've left there. But as she recovers from breast cancer treatment herself, she's spending her time coaching and advocating for better workplace support. And to that end, she's created a platform called Live Work Cancer. But Sue, we'd love to hear your experience, and thank you so much for making time today. Over to you.
Thanks, Thea. Before I share a presentation, you've heard from Kelly the medical perspective of what happens when estrogen production suddenly stops. And what I want to share with you today is my experience from inside the body, inside a cancer experience. Some of it's a little bit tough to listen to, so apologies for that. But you know, the story needs to be told and the conversations need to start. So I'm going to share my screen now. Hopefully it's going to work well. Okay, so I'm assuming that everyone can see my screen. I'm just going to make it a little larger. Okay, right, here we go. I live on the land of the Ku-ring-gai clan, Aboriginal land. It always was and always will be. It's really sad and it's distressing when you get into some of the detail about breast cancer to learn that 30% of Aboriginal women diagnosed with breast cancer have a higher risk of dying than non-Aboriginal people. And it's now time for us to start the conversation about cancer and work. If there's only 3 things that you remember from this presentation, I hope it's that you inform yourselves about breast cancer. Facts are much more helpful when you're supporting somebody than a series of assumptions. And there is plenty of information, I've been buried in it, to help you understand those experiences. And secondly, as many of you are leaders, I'd encourage you to start to explore how you might create a more positive, cancer-kind workplace. And finally, don't be too busy with work that your health goes down your priority list. And before I start, if anything I say or anything we discuss during this networking session, please reach out to your GP or your specialist, or indeed, in the case of cancer, Cancer Council. I assume that many of you would have seen the statistics on this slide during October, which was Breast Cancer Awareness Month. Unfortunately, what is not well understood is that the number of women of working age with breast cancer is increasing. And this is because there's a few things happening. Firstly, the total number of women with breast cancer is increasing. As Kelly said, about 20,000 every year, and about 200 men. And that's up from 15,000 just 10 years ago. And women are being diagnosed with breast cancer earlier, which is a good thing that the diagnosis happens earlier. The Australian Institute of Health and Welfare project that about 1,000 young women under the age of 40 will be diagnosed with breast cancer this year. And that's also increased from 800 in 2011. We're living longer with breast cancer. That's good. The survival rates have gone up to 92%. And our retirement age, when I first started work, it was 55. It's now 67. And about 63% of women that are diagnosed with breast cancer are under the age of 65. So the cohort of women with breast cancer is growing. And let's not forget, as Kelly's already pointed out, the gynecological cancers. And there's about 2,800, if I've done my research, desktop research, done it well, 2,800 working age women impacted by cancer. Against this background, what's really alarming when I started to look at this is that the percentage of breast cancer survivors returning to work is actually decreasing, and the hours worked is reducing. And it's typically difficult, as it has been for me, to return back to my previous role. So as leaders, and I've been a leader, I know we can do something about it, and we should do something about it. And it is the right thing for us to do. So that's why I'm here today, and why I'm dedicating much of my time and my energy to do my bit to improve the journey of the women working with cancer. Here's a little bit about my story. I was very well, healthy, not all that fit, but pretty good. My poodles are beautiful. They have walked the journey with me for 2.5 years, Welby and Raina. And of course, my husband too. He's done a lot more than the poodles. And I was very busy, particularly with work, but I just kept myself extraordinarily busy. And I was fit and healthy, so just keep going. I love my job. I worked for 40 years, all but 1 year when I did the Good Samaritan legislation. My work week was 50, 60, and occasionally 70 hours a week. And I was at the pinnacle of my career when I was diagnosed. And work had been very much a core part of who I was. Cancer knocked on my door in 2020, right in the midst of the COVID pandemic. And my diagnosis was 2 lesions, one grade 2 and one grade 3. It was diagnosed as estrogen receptor positive, or ER positive, as it's called, and HER2 positive. I had surgery, a lumpectomy, to remove the lesions. And then I had to have a second surgery because they didn't get all of the precancer cells, what they call DCIS. After surgery, I went into 5 months of chemotherapy. 2 months with the red devil. I can't remember the technical term, but it's called the red devil, and it's a red devil for a reason. After that, I went into another 3 months of chemotherapy called Taxol. And it was chemotherapy that significantly impacted my cognitive ability, and Kelly's already talked about that. And I'll just give you one example. I mean, there's many more, but my dad turned 90, and it's his last birthday with us. And he loved red wine. And so I thought I'd buy him a case of red wine for his birthday, except that I sent the invoice to my dad and the case of red wine to me. Fortunately, I was able to change the order before he did get the invoice. I wish there was only one example, but I could go on all afternoon about the examples I had. After chemo, I had a shortish series of radiation therapy, and in parallel, 3 weekly infusions of a drug called Herceptin. Herceptin is actually a drug that they use to stop the HER2 positive nature of my diagnosis. After 12 months on that infusion every 3 weeks, they then put me on a drug called neratinib. And if you've ever had a colonoscopy, you'll know that the preparation for a colonoscopy is worse than the treatment or the procedure. Chronic diarrhea, and every week, every 10 days, it's just quite debilitating. But fortunately, I've been on that for nearly a year, and next month I'm off it. So I'm pretty excited about that. In addition to that, I started a drug, an aromatase inhibitor, also referred to in Kelly's introduction. And that aromatase inhibitor is to stop the production and of estrogen and suppress that in my body. The aromatase inhibitor is to address the estrogen or the ER positive nature of my diagnosis. So now I'm living with cancer. The work combination has been really tough. When I was diagnosed, actually, I might have just missed a page. So I'm going through a second menopause. That was what I wanted to say. And that's because it's a hormone therapy and stops all manner of estrogen in my system. So hot flushes returned, insomnia, sexual dysfunction, an additional risk of declining bone density, and chronic fatigue. And my body actually feels every day like I'm 85, not 61. I still have physical challenges, but I'm learning to live with those because you've just got to keep going. However, it's really frustrating managing the fatigue and recognize that cognitively, I'm not as sharp as I used to be. I'm slower and I'm a whole lot less efficient. So working with cancer, that tough combination of cancer and work is really tough. and tough for all of us. When diagnosed, I'd said to my boss, look, it's just a process. My medical oncologist has given me a terrific plan. I know what I've got to do. I'll just need a few days off. But I didn't know what I didn't know. And as soon as I started chemotherapy, that red devil, my life changed and I changed. My work changed. So I decided that I needed to step aside from my work, and I seriously grieved for my job and still do. I grieve more for my job than my diagnosis, because we've got to get it right. I announced to my team that I was stepping down to focus on my health, and I'd never cried in front of so many people at a time. It was just overwhelming. Then the paperwork started, remembering that I'm cognitively not the sharpest tool in the shed. Leave forms, income protection forms, volumes of documentation that I had to prepare to prove that I had breast cancer and that I couldn't work. Over time, I lost my confidence. I lost control of my life. I felt like a whinger when I was talking to people. I felt like I was a burden to those around me. And I couldn't think. I couldn't remember things. And when people would ring up, usually from work, one of the first things they would say after how you're going was, when are you coming back to work? After 16 or so months, we agreed that my executive contract would be terminated. It wasn't all bad. I learned to, for the very first time in my life, to listen to my body. I'm still not doing a very good job of that. And I do enjoy the simple things of life today. So what's next for me? Over the last few months, as I've, got through some of the really difficult side effects, I've been reflecting on how I can turn my 30 years of leadership experience, plus my recent cancer journey, into something good. And I'm passionate and I'm committed to change the work cancer journey for the people that follow me. So I'm going to be doing two things. Firstly, to advocate for better workplace outcomes for people with cancer, including breast cancer, but it's very relevant to other cancers. And this is why I'm here today. I want to start the conversation about making our workplaces cancer kind. Secondly, I want to empower women with breast cancer through their cancer work journey. And I'll do that by helping them one-on-one to navigate the work cancer experience, and also bring together people affected by breast cancer in support groups to help them face the challenges. It's important to be informed. At my age, I remember the ad, oils ain't oils, soul. Well, breast cancer isn't breast cancer. And my journey is just one of 20,000 stories that are out there every year. Making assumptions about the type of cancer, the treatment and the side effects and the impact on our ability to live and work is not helpful. It isn't one disease. There's multiple subtypes, unlike other cancers. Each type of breast cancer has different side effects and therefore has a different impact on our life and on our work. Physical changes may not be evident, like lymphedema. I didn't get lymphedema, but many women do get lymphedema. I certainly got cognitive impairment, lack of confidence and the ability to manage or engage in stressful, complex environments. Many of us don't talk about our breast health at work. And as Thea's doing, we should put that on the agenda for a discussion in our workplaces. Breast density, depending on how dense your breasts are, it may impact your ability or the ability of a mammogram to actually detect breast cancer. So I encourage everyone to find out the breast density. And even when we get back on that horse, that workhorse, realize that the person that's coming back to work, part-time, full-time, is likely to have changed. and we do change. We're different. And why am I sharing this? Because we need to be informed about breast cancer. We can't rely on the employee who comes to us and says that we've got breast cancer to educate us about it. We don't have the headspace or the heart space to be your only source of information. And leaders, not just HR, and I'm really talking to a very broad audience here, need to be prepared for the next person that comes into their office and says, I've got breast cancer. It's not really helpful to hear that my mum had breast cancer and she died, or my sister had breast cancer and she worked right through it. So I don't know why you're not coming back to work. Or don't worry, you're strong, you're tough, you'll beat it. You don't know that. The benefits of a cancer-kind workplace are significant. And remember that there will be over 12,000 working age women announcing to their manager that they have been diagnosed with a woman's cancer, including the gynecological cancers. Practical, empathetic support is needed so we don't burn out when we come back, that you enable that person to fulfill or to reach their desired potential. And you give them a sense of control of their life, of their work, of their well-being back, which they've lost. And then it helps them to integrate back into work at the right time and the best time for them. And it's a good thing for your business as well, because you retain the talent, the experience, the corporate knowledge, which improves your productivity. You'll grow your employee loyalty. You'll build organizational wellness, and your leaders will learn to be and become better leaders for going through the experience. So a cancer-friendly or cancer-kind workplace isn't hard. It's minimum cost and minimum effort. I'd encourage everyone to start with the basics. Look at what the Cancer Council recommends. I'm sure most of you have got this in place, but it's worth checking. Then I encourage you to do two things. Firstly, be informed. Have a group of people in your organisation that understand breast cancer and other cancers or chronic illnesses so that they're well resourced when the person comes in and says, I have breast cancer. And start the conversation, build network groups. You know, I spoke recently to a women's network group in a large organisation. It was a fantastic opportunity to start that conversation. And there's more that we can do once we've got the basics done. Eliminate some of the forms. Do you really need a form to say that I'm not coming to work because I got breast cancer? Modifying your return to work forms or frameworks. I hate the word return to work, by the way. Make them cancer specific. Modify your policies to meet the needs of chronic illnesses like breast cancer and other life-changing challenges, such as menopause, which is really a silent experience for pretty much all of us. And even consider paying some extra leave. You know, it doesn't cost a lot to give a bit of extra leave than recruitment costs to rehire. In summary, it's early days for me. I'm in the setup phase with Live Work Cancer. However, every conversation I've had since I started to reflect on how I can change the experience of those that follow me has confirmed that there is a gap. Women are finding the reintegration back into work difficult, and better support will improve the well-being of those that are diagnosed. So today, I hope I've started more conversations. Lastly, if you'd like me to kickstart this conversation in your workplace, please contact me via email, which is there, or LinkedIn. I haven't set up my website yet. I'm still got my training wheels on and lots of things I need to get done. And if there is someone that you know in your work or anywhere with breast cancer who needs help to manage work cancer challenges, please contact me. All of the engagements with particular individuals, patients, survivors is 100% free. I'll use my coaching experience and my breast cancer experience to support them. It is my way of giving back to the working women of Australia. That's it, Thea.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Sue, for that really well researched, but also very raw account of your experience, and also for adding in your reflections on, you know, what workplaces could do better from being informed, starting a conversation, looking at the return to work processes, policies, and leave as well. So thank you so much. Yeah, really appreciate it. And so we've now got time for Q&A, comments, questions. If any of you want to ask a question but don't want to be identified, just drop me a little private message and I'll read it out on your behalf. But you can put your hand up if you would like to ask it verbally, or you can put something in the chat box.